Music for All is proud to sponsor Bandstand. At Music for All, we're about providing positively life-changing experiences. Join us with your marching band at Bands of America or with your concert ensemble at the Music for All National Festival. Students can audition for our honor ensembles or attend camp at the Music for All Summer Symposium, featuring the Sweetwater Director Academy, an amazing week of professional development for directors led by Dr. Nola Jones. Learn more at musicforall.org.
Romeo Music is the leader in audio, video, music, and lighting technology for educators. With a combined nearly 200 years of experience, Romeo Music's subject matter experts understand the struggles that face teachers in today's music classrooms. With a laser focus on educational technology, Romeo Music provides a turnkey solution, everything from audio cables to on-site training. To learn more, visit www.romeomusic.net.
Hello, and welcome to Bandstand, the official podcast of the Tennessee Bandmasters Association. I'm your host, David Adelit, and I hope you'll join us on a journey through the past, present, and future of bands in Tennessee. We'll delve into the rich history of Tennessee bands, uncovering the hidden gems and legendary figures who shaped the state's band landscape. We'll survey the present, where you'll meet the movers and shakers of today, gaining insights from their expertise and experiences. And we'll gaze towards the future, exploring the exciting possibilities that await Tennessee's school bands. All right, everybody, this is one I'm really excited about. We have Andrew Lawson on and Jonas Marshall on as well. And Andrew is the band director at Innovation Academy in Robertson County. And Jonas Marshall is a sophomore band and choir kid at Siegel High School. And we're going to talk tonight about composing. And these are both relatively young individuals. Andrew, I'm going to call you young. I hope that's okay. If that insults you, then you'll have to get over it. But these are two relatively young composers that are here in Middle Tennessee, and I want to hear their stories, and I want to share their story. We have more folks out there that may want to become composers that will sort of cast aside their fears and jump into this. So, Andrew and Jonas, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start with your story first, okay? And Jonas, I'm going to start with you. So Jonas, just tell us your story, your life history. Ready to go.
Okay, well, I'm 15 years old. I go to Siegel High School. Band and choir, marching band, jazz band, all of that. I play saxophone in the band, but my main instrument is piano. I've been taking lessons on piano. I've also taken drum lessons. And I started composing about 2 years ago at the end of my 8th grade year.
Very good. Okay. Andrew, your turn.
Yeah, so my name's Andrew Lawson. I am currently, as David said, teaching at the Innovation Academy of Robertson County. This is my 5th year there and my 5th year teaching as well. I started writing in middle school for a small group of friends. Then when I got into 8th grade, I started playing my horn. I'm a horn player at church. And as that group of musicians grew, we all got super bored with just playing the stock charts that were not very well written. And so I actually really got my start learning how to write by writing at church. And at first, just transcribing hymns for our little wind ensemble, as we called it. And from there, I started arranging things. And I was super fortunate. I'm a graduate of Tullahoma High School. And for all the Middle Tennessee folks, Tullahoma has just a fantastic band program, a fantastic arts program across the board. And they had a band honors course, which was really cool. As a high school student, there were some research components to that. You had to attend performances, but there was also a composition component that kind of evolved as you took that course over 2 to 3 years. And so there was one year that was like, okay, you have to write for a chamber ensemble. The next year it was like, write for an instrument family. And my senior year, the task was, you have to write a piece for a band. I don't remember anything about that piece. It probably was not very good, but that was the first experience I had writing for band. And then I went to college for music education, and I wrote something for the horn choir at Tennessee Tech. Shortly thereafter, I entered a contest on a whim with the Dallas Wind Symphony, and I remember leaving a wind ensemble rehearsal and hopping on the elevator in Bryan Fine Arts at Tech to go put my horn away and then go to marching band rehearsal. And I'm standing there next to Mr. Herman, and I check my email, which was kind of my custom after rehearsal, and I see this email from the Dallas Winds. And I think I just remember handing him my phone and saying, "Hey, can you read this?" And that was kind of the first break. And after that, a few smaller things came in. I was really fortunate to get a call from my alma mater to write a piece for Tullahoma for Justin Scott, and to surprise him with that, the band leadership did that, which was super cool. That students came together to commission a piece, and they had the help of Lisa Burton, who had just gotten there at the time. So that was really a cool thing. I wrote a little bit through college, mainly for some contests and for friends of mine, and then got to my senior year where I really started to put some stuff out, and now I get to do it kind of as a part-time job.
Okay, so that's a lot about how you got started. Jonas, what made you think about getting started with this?
I think the whole like idea of like composition, I think was like at the end of 8th grade. And what I actually wanted to do, I wanted to learn how to like make like notation, like how was music notation actually created. So I looked it up. I found like this software, and then that led to me like actually making my own stuff. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I probably started out with like some piano solos, and then I remember I was really inspired by going to band camp for the marching band and hearing the horn line and the percussion and all that. So I was like, all right. So I went to piano to marching band, which was a pretty big jump. But I mean, I started liking it a lot, obviously, and I just kept going.
Andrew, I like your choir, your church setup. That was kind of me too. Like I had some really early, like a Commodore 64 music notation program, and the first thing I did was went through the hymnal because I was at a little small church and there was nobody singing alto or tenor. So I'd never heard 4-part harmony before. And so yeah, that resonates with me, Andrew, your church experience
Well, I
there.
think, yeah. Well, and that, I was learning part writing before I was learning part writing. I showed up to college and was like, oh, I know some of this stuff already because I had it in the hymnal.
Mm. I want to hear you both talk about one or two of your works that you really are proud of.
I think for me, there's a handful of works that come to mind. Um, the first work that I was really proud of was the first one with the Dallas Wind Symphony. Um, that piece was very much on the fly, written on the fly. It's called Mach 10. The thing that I hate about that piece, though, and Jonas, you'll discover, like, you'll write something and you'll think, oh wow, this sounds really cool, and then someone will make you play it, and you may think otherwise after you play it. That piece, there was a lot of very young composer mistakes for me, like what key I was writing in for brass ensemble. And then we recorded it at Tennessee Tech, and I was like, holy cow, this is hard. But that one, I'm proud of that one just because it kind of got the ball rolling on a professional level versus me just writing for my own church. The next big piece that I was really proud of, for several reasons, was one that I wrote just a few years ago for the University of Georgia, As Long as Stars Shall Shine. And that one's really personal to me. It was written in memory of a very good friend of mine that had passed away unexpectedly, who was finishing her doctorate at UGA. And so when she had passed, a few of us kind of talked, and I ended up reaching out to her parents. We had played in a quintet for some time at Tennessee Tech before she went on to her master's and before I went on to teaching. And I said, hey, would you mind if we did this piece? We'll have to reach out to the university, of course, and but I'd like to do something to kind of honor her. And they gave the green light, and I called UGA the next day and asked, like, can you put their band director on the phone? And of course, they had no clue who I was, but I kind of explained the situation, and that piece was incredibly difficult to write emotionally, just because I wrote it within like the first month after she had passed. it was kind of on a tight deadline because they're like, yeah, let's do it, but we want to put it on the spring concert, so we need it really quickly. And but I was also really proud of kind of everything that came together in that piece to honor her, and it served kind of a bigger picture than just like, oh, let's write a piece for band. And then most recently, the piece that I got to do, was fortunate enough to go up to Midwest and premiere with Alex Kaminsky and the Vanderbilt band, Exultate, which was just a really fun piece that I wrote for myself and posted it on Facebook and said, hey, is anyone interested in this? And Alex picked it up and they took it to Midwest, which was a really incredible experience.
Congratulations. That's quite a pinnacle there.
It was certainly overwhelming.
Were you nervous? I mean, Kaminsky's great, so you knew the performance was going to be good.
Yeah. I'm nervous every single time a piece gets premiered, not necessarily because I think the ensemble's going to mess something up. Just nervous of like, am I going to like how it sounds? Because I rarely get to hear the music before it gets performed. And Sibelius plays it perfectly every single time with no errors in phrasing or dynamics or balance. And so to hear it off the page with real people putting real expression into it is always, I don't want to say it's stressful. It's just exciting.
Okay, so Jonas, let's hear about you. And I want you to talk about that experience too of hearing it for the first time live.
Yeah, so I think, so I've entered, I have a pretty small portfolio of pieces, I guess. But
it's okay, Jonas. You're 15. It's it's fine.
So basically, I found this competition like 2 weeks before the submission date, and I already had this piece, and I thought it was pretty good. So I adapted it a little bit. And I submitted it, and then I ended up winning, and I was able to go to the rehearsals, and the conductor would like turn around and ask for feedback, and that was pretty nerve-wracking. But I mean, hearing it live was like way better because you get used to the software and how it sounds, and then you hear it live and it's like really familiar, but it's like different. So I mean, it's awesome. And then the second piece that I'm most proud of is another piece that I entered into a competition. I had worked. I didn't end up winning anything, but I had worked on it like over the summer, and I mean, I thought it turned out really great. It's the piece that I'm probably most proud of.
Okay, what are you both working on now? What's next?
I actually just finished up a commission a few weeks ago, and so I'm kind of taking a break. But for Vanessa Cobb up at Montgomery Central, who commissioned a piece. So she actually commissioned an arrangement of a hymn, which is kind of my bread and butter, since it's what I kind of grew up learning to write with. She commissioned an arrangement of Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing to honor her principal, who was leaving their school to, I believe, go into a position in central office. I don't quote me on that. But but that was the principal's favorite hymn, and so she commissioned that for her band. And then Tullahoma actually just on Sunday this past week premiered a piece that Jeff Phillips commissioned called Groove Number 5, which is a really interesting little, like, I would say probably a grade 3 piece, but it's got a lot of like mixed meter and like changing meter throughout. There's a lot of 7/8 going back and forth between that, like 4/4 and 3/4, all within the range and like technical ability of like a grade 2 or grade 3 band.
Very good. Jonas, what about you? What's next?
Well, I think recently I've been, I guess maybe just playing around with like an ensemble band, concert band kind of stuff. Because the two pieces that I talked about earlier, those were both orchestra pieces, and I'd like to get like a complete band work. And I've got a bunch of ideas, and it's like in about seven minutes of like music that I'm gonna mash together somehow for like a concert band.
Getting started is sometimes the hardest part. Like once you get going, a lot of it kind of flows, but getting started, like just getting those first notes on the page, can be the most challenging part.
Well, let's talk about more. That's a good segue into talking about your process. So You know, I'm not a composer. I do some arranging here and there. But I remember reading somewhere about Maslanka. David Maslanka would go out to his little hut in Montana and play Bach chorales to start his day, and then that would sort of get him in the mindset to write. So I don't know if that's true or not, or if that's just a
I've heard the same story from his I want to say his son talking, and it's written, and there's a few videos about it on their website, I think. That he would give himself like 4 hours a day to write, and even if he didn't write anything, he would have at least had the opportunity to. Um, my process kind of has changed with each piece, especially since I started teaching. Before I started teaching, and I was just a lowly college student, I had a lot more free time on my hands, or at least a lot more energy. um, and I would start pen and paper at the piano first and write out kind of a sketch, and then I would go to the computer and type stuff up. Now, a lot of times I'll kind of write down a roadmap on paper of like kind of the order of events, but then I go straight to the computer. But I've got a keyboard hooked up to my computer, so um, I'll play through that a few times and then just start inputting stuff. Normally, I make a condensed score. And Jonas, this may help you out a little bit just to try it. Every composer I've talked to has a different method. And they're all pretty much always tweaking how they do it too, if they find a more efficient way to write. Um, but I like writing out a condensed score first and then trying to orchestrate everything. I found it really takes the work out of trying to write melodies if you're just writing it for piano first and then putting it into the instruments. But other than that, the time of day now is like whatever time I have. I do tend to write later at night. Um, and getting into the mindset for me starts with a big cup of coffee.
That's good. All right, Jonas, what about you?
Time of day, I agree. Evening, I think is the best. My process, I guess, one thing that I'd like to do is do more just like pen and paper, because I feel like right now I'm just doing like I got like a piano and then the computer, and I'd actually like to try out like notating it on paper or like a condensed score like you talked about. Um, and I think, and you mentioned David Maslanka, and I read somewhere that he talked about that how there was something lost if there wasn't like a pen to paper, like because like I guess you got to think about it more because you write it down and then you enter it into the software, and I'd like to explore that more. Um, and then I guess like inspiration wise, I like finding an idea. Um, I think like nature, just like walking outside. And then I think the best inspiration is just like listening to live performers, with emphasis on live, because it's just so different than a recording.
How do I
'Cause
have
you
an
can
opinion
like,
about that, but let me hear yours, Jonas. Talk a little bit more about what that difference is for you.
I feel like when you listen to something on a recording, you can hear how it sounds, but when you listen to it live, you can really like, I guess, feel it more, right? Because I mean, and there's like mistakes and stuff. Um, I guess a good example is I heard the the junior and senior gold band, the gold mid-state band. I heard this like really crazy piece, and it was awesome. And so I went home and looked it up, and the recording was, I mean, it was just a recording. Like you can hear all
Right.
these details. It was way better live.
Hear the depth. Yep.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah, live performances are a whole lot better, and I think if you do have to use recordings, like getting them from really high quality sources is key. Um, my favorite groups to listen to are the Dallas Winds, the UT Austin Wind Ensemble, North Texas. The groups that sound just as good on the recordings as they do live.
Yeah, I think there's a new Benjamin Easley sent me this today. There's a new recording of Texas playing the Maslanka 4. Is that right? Have you seen that, Andrew?
Yeah, I just watched it
Yeah, it's on
yesterday.
my list for
Actually,
tomorrow.
it's of course it's Junkin conducting, so it's going to be great. Or it is great. It's fantastic. There's two recordings by them online. One from some years ago, and now this new one, and they're both just breathtaking, even on the recording. I think one note to add on the pen and paper, and I wish I had time to do more of it, the emphasis on the pen, because, you know, if you have a pencil, you can erase stuff. With the pen on the paper, and if you really get into this, um, you really have to take your time. Okay, is this really what I want to write down? Because otherwise, you're scrapping a whole page because pens don't write well on
Mhm.
whiteout. And the staff gets covered up on what with whiteout too. So you've really got to think. And I would definitely say all of my best works have started on
Mm.
with pen and paper.
Okay, how much editing do you do? You know, they say there's painters that have trouble putting down the brush.
I have a little bit of trouble putting it down. I tend to do kind of a glossary edit first, and I just go through all the parts individually to make sure there's no collisions on the page and things like that. Um, and to make sure like there are no slur marks in the marimba part, which inevitably still happens sometimes. Just this past week, I got a message from Atticus Hensley down at Tullahoma asking, "Hey, what are the slur marks for in the marimba part on groove number 5?" And I'm like, "Well, those are for the clarinets, actually."
That's called Control C, Control V. That's what that was.
You're exactly right. And so, the editing, I find that even after I've gone through it and after the publisher's gone through it, the first time a group gets a hold of it, I still get an email. Hey, what's this note right here? Is this right? I think the piece that Vandercook played at Midwest, what they sold at the booth with Murphy Music was not the final copy because they got that about a month beforehand, or they printed it about a month before the conference. I want to say by the time we hit the conference, we were on probably the fifth or sixth revision of the score, just finding little small things or just finding things in parts that were not necessarily idiomatic for the instrument, which is kind of the downside to writing a concert pitch. Because you hit that transpose button and sometimes you look at it afterwards, you're like, oh, this is not a run that can be played on the clarinet easily. As you end up doing revisions. But honestly, that's my favorite part is collaborating with whoever's premiering the piece to find, okay, is there something we can rework here to keep the character of the music, but maybe make it a little more playable, or just to fix
Yeah.
typos.
Jonas, what about you?
I find that if I'm writing a piece and it's like almost done, when I'm writing, I'll just tend to like write everything down, save all that editing for later, which makes it pretty annoying once it is later. Um, and I mean, Mr. Lawson said, there's always going to be mistakes, like the slurs. Um, and I think back to the painter analogy, like finding when to stop. I guess like once the canvas is full, and you're like, I guess these scenes you don't want to like cover anything up. I guess the same thing can be said for the music.
I think sometimes, when we send stuff off, so I'm really fortunate. Only one of my publishers actually edits my scores. The rest of them, it is just I send them the files and they publish it. Um, the cool thing about that is there have been some mistakes or things that I would have considered mistakes had I caught it that end up sounding pretty cool.
What's an
Um,
example of that,
and
Andrew?
so there was a chord in um there was a chord in Exultate actually, that Alex freaked out. He goes, "Man, this is really kind of crunchy right here." And I forget what measure it's in. Did you mean to write that? And he goes, "It sounds cool, but it just doesn't." He goes, "I just want to make sure because it does this one note doesn't fit in any other part." And I was like, "Well, that is a typo, but if you like it, let's keep it." And it added just a little bit of zing to that chord that kind of propelled it forward. Um, and there've been a couple of other pieces too that there's been a typo. And then on the flip side, I've actually gone through where mistakes have been made in performances that sounded better than what was written. And I've gone back and rewritten parts to match the recording after the fact before it was sent to the publisher. There was a piece I wrote for Rowan County High School, Zach Williamson, after I student taught with him as kind of a thank you. And their horn player, there was one note she chipped on the whole performance in a solo. A fantastic horn player. But there was one note, and she came up to me after the performance, was like, "I'm so sorry I chipped that note on that solo." I was like, "Are you kidding? It sounded like a grace note." And I went back and
That's now a
rewrote
mordant. That's right. That's funny.
Which, as a horn player, I greatly appreciate it because, we chip notes all the time.
That's really good. So, what misconceptions do people have, now that you're both composers, about the process of composing? People think it's one thing, but it's really another.
I think not enough credit gets given to composers for their ability to orchestrate well. Because there are a lot of really great pieces out there that are not great because they have really fantastic melodies or because the harmony is particularly intriguing, but the orchestration really makes it work. One of those pieces for me is Man and Bean by Hayden Wood, which, based on textbook orchestration, is really not all that well written, but the character of that piece comes from its orchestration. Especially at the end when it's really big, full 2D band. I think Granger's a really great example of that, taking really simple melodies, but the way he makes the band sound when they play them is just incredible, even though it's the same melody over and over and over again, like Molly on the Shore. It's a great tune, but it wouldn't be great to just listen to that tune for 10 minutes without all the different colors that he brings in. I also think people underestimate how much time it takes to write a piece of music and really make it good. And that's kind of variable. I got to go down to Tullahoma a couple of years ago to premiere a march that I wrote for them. And one of the kids asked me, "Well, how long did it take?" And I was like, "Well, that's a really great question." I said, last night I was at UGA. This piece was 14 minutes long, and it took me 3 weeks to write. I said, "You guys are working on a march that's 2.5 minutes long, and it took me 6 months to get the version that they had." I think by the time I finished that march, I had enough material to write about 4 more marches.
Jonas, what are some of the challenges people might not be aware of?
I mean, at first, I think if you're like wanting to get into composition, I think the best thing to do is just learn about all the instruments, which, I mean, if you play them, then you already know that. But like the instruments that you don't play, you can't just you can't depend on the software to tell you if it's like out of the range or anything, because every note sounds different. And then I guess not like a challenge of composition, but I feel like at least some people that I know, they think, and it's probably because of like the rarity of composition as like a hobby for me at least. Like I don't really know that many other people that do this as like a hobby, but a lot of people think it's like impossible to do. And like sure there's challenges and stuff, but like anybody can learn.
That's a good message for lots of kids that are listening to this podcast, hopefully.
Well, and I think to bounce off that, just getting past the mental block of like, okay, how do I start? And I think my suggestion would be like, just do it. You're going to have pieces that you don't like at all. You're going to have pieces that are absolutely great. And at least for me, there's more that are not good than there are good that I've written. And the ones that are not good don't often see the light of day, or at least they don't pass their premiere. I have a handful of works that like someone has played on their recital, but I'm never going to send it to a publisher because I don't like it. And so as you continue writing, Jonas, like you're definitely going to run into that. Not every Picasso is famous. There's the masterpieces in there, and then there's like his triangles.
And that reminded me of, I think this is pretty kind of common feedback, but you can't always look for perfection. Sometimes you just have to like write some trash and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think there's an author named Stephen Pressfield that wrote a book called The War of Art, and he talks about that very thing. Just go write. Just have your schedule and just start at 9 o'clock in the morning with a big cup of coffee and just write, and don't worry about whether it's good or bad or judge yourself. Just write, and then that's what you revisit later on. And because that, I'm sure, again, I'm not a composer, but that little voice of doubt can be your worst enemy with being creative.
Oh, absolutely. I would go even further to say sometimes, um, when you don't have limitations, it's really hard to write and to be creative because you don't have a direction. And so, being put in a
Hmm.
box helps to eliminate some of the
Well, I
trash.
guess that's decision paralysis to a degree, isn't it? When you have just a wide open, no parameters.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think I've written one piece where I didn't have any limitations and it wasn't commissioned. Um, it was actually in the middle of COVID and I was just bored. And I was like, well, what if I had no limitations? And even still, I had to place limitations on myself, just with instrumentation or with style or things like that. Um, David Maslanka has a really great quote that I've just about got memorized now. Um, he said, the sources that give rise to a piece of music are many and deep. It's possible to describe the technical aspects of a work, its construction principles, its orchestration, but nearly impossible to write of its sole nature except the hints and suggestions. And I've always thought that quote was just super powerful because it is really easy to talk about the really technical details, the ink. Um, but I think a lot of people think that that's just about all you think about. And so when you come across with like a really well crafted melody or you're writing with some orchestration that's really great, um, it stands out. But I would encourage Jonas, like, listening to recordings of your favorite composers and studying their scores really will broaden your horizon to like, oh, okay, I can put this tool in my toolbox. My favorite people to study are David Maslanka, Mahler, and John Williams. And I've got just dozens of their scores. Them and Alfred Reed um, for band specifically.
Alfred Reed always makes the band sound good. Jonas, I do want to go back to this though. You're a pianist and a saxophonist, but your first piece that you got recognition for was for orchestra. So, what was it like for you writing strings, and what did you learn through that going to those rehearsals about writing for strings?
Well, at first, I mean, I just tried to like, because I think I just had to learn everything about this about the strings, and I still am. But like, it's just so different from a wind instrument. And then going to the rehearsals, you just like, I guess, get to know how like versatile they can be.
Was it did you get feedback from the concertmaster on bowing, or how much of it did you mark the bowing before rehearsals?
I did a little bit. Just like I'm sure a lot of it was like awkward, but I just like kind of imagine like the bow. Like yeah, imagine playing it and then seeing what was
Hmm.
natural for me. I guess even though I don't play anything.
But you could kind of imagine it though, to some degree. That's
Yeah,
great.
a little bit.
What this is for both of you. What can band directors do to encourage young composers?
I'll start this one off. The thing that helped me the most as a student, and that I'm trying to actively do now as a teacher, is just giving students opportunities to write. Even if whatever gets turned in isn't particularly good, there's a practice make I don't want to say practice makes perfect, but it does make progress. And exposing students to really high quality band literature, even if your ensemble isn't big enough or quite good enough yet to play some of the masterworks, just having listening journals or something to expose them to really great band and orchestra and even choral literature is super important. But giving opportunities for kids to write too is really awesome. I introduced my students earlier this year to a few different notation softwares. My favorite of which, I don't use it anymore, but it's what I started on, is MuseScore. And it's free, and it's up there with the Sibeliuses and the Finales. You can pay a couple $100 and get any of these professional programs, but unless you're actively publishing, MuseScore is phenomenal. It's got a great bank of sounds that you can hear, and it's really user friendly. In fact, I just had a seventh grade clarinet player write a piece for her friends, and she brought it in and she sent me the files after they played it for me. And I just went in and cleaned up the score a little bit. I didn't change any notes, didn't change any rhythms. I just made it look a little easier to read. And they ended up performing it at our fine arts night, which is really cool to say, like, yeah, we've got seventh graders writing music for themselves. And I just discussed with my high school group yesterday um, that in the fall we're going to have a composition contest, and it'll run up until about December. And there'll be a chamber music category for middle school and high school, and a chamber music category for or a band category. And so whoever decides to enter that, the winning composition for chamber music, we're going to play it on Fine Arts Night, and the winning band composition will premiere it on the spring concert.
So what do you think, Jonas? What can directors do to encourage kids to write?
Just having the band that you're in like play like really famous works. Like this year, the Seagulls band, we played Korean folk song. That's like really famous in the band world. We also sight read some other pieces that are like staples, I guess, of band music. And I mean, I learned a lot through that, just like sounds and mixtures and techniques, I guess. And that was really cool. And then I guess maybe just feedback, because the directors are the ones that like they buy all these pieces, so they have like individual stuff that they look for, and just maybe making that or giving them feedback is great, I think.
Andrew, what would you say to Jonas? What would be your advice?
I would definitely say, aside from writing for contests, which is great, you don't always get feedback from them, which is unfortunate. I wish that more contests would give feedback to the composers, but given how many submissions they have, that might be difficult. Getting in touch with composers. There's a lot of composers now that are alive that you can reach out to
Some have
and
Instagrams.
get not even feedback for your music, but just to get advice. There are a handful of composers that I see pretty frequently that students reach out to them and just to get advice with things, and sometimes they respond and sometimes they don't. I was really fortunate that someone told me I was really dumb in undergrad, and I took all my theory classes with Greg Danner, and never once at my time at Tennessee Tech did I ask him for a lesson in composition, which was not the smartest thing on my behalf looking back. But I was fortunate that where I was student taught in East Tennessee, Lee University was right down the road. And so I went down a few times while I was student teaching on the weekend and got a couple lessons from David Holsinger, and which was phenomenal. He's a brilliant composer and a great teacher. I've had some lessons via Zoom with a couple of other composers and been able to email back and forth with some more. And so, finding composers whose work you respect and you like, and reaching out just to see if they'd be willing to look at your piece and give you some feedback is really awesome. And band directors can do a lot to do that with bridging the gap. I get bombarded with emails all the time of like, oh, will you look at my piece? And sometimes it's easy to get lost in the mix. But if the band director reaches out and says, hey, we're playing your music, oh, and by the way, I've got this student that's trying to get into composing, what advice would you give them, or could we do a Zoom call? I know a lot of people that would be willing to do a 30-minute Zoom call for free. I know I've certainly done it.
Cool. Jonas, what's next for you? You're a sophomore. I don't mean what's next junior year, but I mean, are you thinking about doing this for a living? And do you have any ideas on where you might want to study as an undergrad?
I think doing composition as a job is definitely on the table. And I think if I did that, I'd also like to like teach or like be a director of, I don't know, band or choir or something. As of soon, I think I might, like, there's all these good composition like camps over the country. I might try for
Great.
some of those. Yeah.
When are you going to write a choral work for Brenda Gregory?
Well, I've done a couple choir stuff, but
If you need me to call her and encourage her to program some of your works, I'm happy to do that. Well, I've enjoyed this conversation very much. I like both of you personally and respect what you're doing professionally as composers and want nothing but the best for you. And I hope that your message here will resonate with folks that listen to this podcast, because we need lots of young, vibrant composers writing great music for our bands. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Bandstand. Bandstand's mission is to build a stronger, more unified band community in Tennessee by fostering meaningful conversations about the past, present, and future of school bands in our state. If you have topic suggestions or need to get in touch with us, email us at tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Your input is important to us, and if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss about the past, present, or future of Tennessee bands, please let us know. Again, that email is tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Right now, we're broadcasting on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, so please subscribe, review, and rate. Box 5, please. And if you find something interesting or helpful, please share this podcast with your friends. Bandstand is proud to be sponsored by Music for All and Romeo Music. See you next time.